Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to be trying to think outside of the box because of what's been going on in the gaming industry over the past couple of years. And as the title says, we're going to try to hack BD strategies for devs and publishers today. And by BD strategies, I'm not talking about how to use LinkedIn or, how to hustle at an event or, pick up smoking because people might need a lighter. I'm talking about actual revenue generating strategies or cost decreasing strategies or financial mitigation strategies. That's what we're talking about here. Now, the reason why I really, would like to talk to you about this is really because over the past couple of years, I've been dealing with a lot of publishers and developers who've been telling me the same thing. We don't have the funds anymore, or my studio is going to have to close down because I only have 1 month left, right, when it comes to my runway. What am I supposed to do? Now, before we dive into the subject, I'm just going to tell you a tiny bit about me. My name is Mehdi Benkirane. Think of Eddie with an M, or Mediterranean if you want. Forget about the H. The reason why I have a very exotic sounding name is because I was born and raised in Casablanca. But I started my professional career in the music industry. And the irony of it all is that what happened in the music industry is something that I'm witnessing today in the gaming industry as well. I eventually got into gaming in 2009 through academia, where I started running academic programs, building different curricula. At the time, Unity had democratized the game engine market, which obviously, created, the indie scene as we know it today. And eventually, I actually started my own company that started monetizing music for video games, which is another aspect that we should talk about later if you actually happen to have any music that you own as a studio or as a publisher. After that, I became an agent for 12 studios across Europe. Well, one of them was in Pakistan as well, where I brought RFPs and publishing agreements, development funding, work for hire, co-dev opportunities for all these studios, to then eventually join Ubisoft, i3D.net specifically, where I currently am VP of BD. And i3D is effectively a game hosting company that is owned by Ubisoft, but we host online multiplayer games for the likes of Epic, EA, Hi-Rez, Raw Fury, Saber, you name it, all these sorts of companies. But then even more recently, I just started my own company, which is a strategy and business consulting firm for game studios and publishers out there. And yes, it's called Zenith Pirates because all my life I've been told I look like a pirate, so I was like, what the hell? Now, enough about me. I think it's only fair for me to continue by first finding out who you are. So please raise your hand if you're a developer. Thank you very much. Please raise your hand if you're a publisher. No publishers. All right. Please raise your hand if you're a developer that does work for hire. Okay, please raise your hand if you're a developer that does own IP. Got it, thank you. Okay. All right, now, so we've all heard phrases like this recently. Money has become expensive, right? We've all heard phrases like, publishers are very demanding today. They need me to bring a community, a vertical slice, all of that before they could even possibly consider my project, right? We've all heard publishers are now saying, well, we've invested so much in games XYZ and, we didn't get any traction. Now, there's a variety of reasons as to why all of this has been happening, but it actually comes down to 2 problems. The first one, saturation is real. If you look at the amount of titles that have been released on Steam in recent years, it's become intense. Now, if you look at the evolution, you might think it's actually not that bad, in the sense that, there are over 3.2 billion players on Earth at the moment, right? So surely 16,000 new titles this year, that's the forecast, right? For 3.2 billion players is not going to be a problem. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. Because the reality is, playtime, that's the big problem, has become a massive commodity. As a matter of fact, if you look at the amount of playtime, average hours per quarter played on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, from Q1 2021 to Q1 2024, you'll see that there's been a very steady decrease that's happened. And that decrease is actually not the most alarming thing. The most alarming thing is the fact that 80% of playtime in 2023 was around 66 titles. Digest that for a second. That is really, really scary. And that is why publishers today, ask people to bring communities. They need to know that there's going to be some sort of visibility for that game that they're trying to bring, that you're trying to bring onto the market. But the situation's even more dire than that, because when it comes to these 66 titles that, have been that consists of 80% of playtime in 2023, sadly, we're talking that more than 60% of playtime, right, accounted for titles that are 6 years old and over. Exactly. Let's not say who you've worked for before. But, so, try to compute that for a second. 60% of playtime from 2022 to 2023 consisted of games that are 6 years old or more. Now, the top 5 older titles accounted for over 25% of all playtime in 2023. Here they are. Now, if you look at these statistics, imagine the following. Somebody comes to you and tells you, give me money, I'm working on this game and it's awesome. Believe me, look, try it. Is it fun? Awesome. Are you still going to go ahead and do it? Because you probably might want to know that there is more than just you who finds that game awesome. You need added visibility, and visibility has become very expensive and difficult. Now, the irony of it all, though, is that if you look at the most popular types of new games in terms of playtime, because new games, thankfully, have been picking up. Playtime in 2023 for titles released in the last 2 years has reached about 23% of the total player base. But 60% of that 23% is actually around franchises. We're talking Warzone, we're talking EA Football Club, we're talking Madden, we're talking NBA 2K, these sorts of titles. For the non-franchise titles, right, that actually accounted to only about 3.5%. And that includes titles like Diablo 4, Hogwarts Legacy, Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, and the list goes on. But if you look at the nature of these games overall in today's playtime trends, you'll see that live service pay-to-play, right, followed by premium titles and live service free-to-play, have been by far the most popular titles out there. And a lot of publishers today are trying to sort of tap into the long-tail revenue lines of, live service games. Because effectively, a premium title, if you sell it, great, but then what? Because you don't really know what else could happen if you basically need to, increase revenue. So that's why most people are looking for, live service games now. All this to say, with what's been going on you cannot continue with the same approach you have had so far trying to actually generate revenue. Now, we all know the traditional revenue lines, right? Sources of revenue for developers, work for hire, co-dev, or, own IP development, funding, and publishing, right? For publishers, we're talking project funding and publishing, we're talking project publishing, and finally, equity-based investment and first-party publishing. These are the traditional models that we all know, that we've all been using over the past few years. But because competition is fierce for visibility, because there is saturation in the market, because money has become expensive, because there are so many studios out there trying to get that little, that little spot where they can get the cash, you cannot continue just looking at it this way, right? And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people think that this guy said a very famous phrase, but it turns out it was Rita Mae Brown, who was an author, who actually said that phrase. And this is exactly what the principle of today's presentation is all about. So how can we think outside of the box to generate revenue or, actually minimize costs and risks, financial costs and risks? Well, let's talk about developers. Now, when it comes to developers, start by pitching to developers. You might argue, but what? Well, so I don't know if you've attended the talk about investments in games before, the panel that was hosted by Adam and then, welcomed representatives from who was it now? Transcend, Behold, and Mika Games. A lot of VC funds at the moment are investing into teams. Not games, teams. Now, because between November 2022 and now, over 20,000 people lost their jobs, a lot of very smart people were made redundant with some very, very healthy severance packages. So a lot of studios, a lot of new studios are sprouting every day. And because the founders come with a high pedigree, VC funds are looking at them. Now, if you pitch to developers, these types of developers, these new developers for work for hire co-dev, you're actually solving a massive problem that they might have that a lot of people are not necessarily aware of. What is that problem? Can anybody picture that? They don't know agile development. If they've operated in AAA settings all of their professional lives, they're specialists who are used to conveyor belt production style, right? And because they're taking on a AA project, right, they're not familiar with that particular process. This is where the likes of you, developers who have been agile and worked in an agile way over the past few years, could come in. So whenever you see a new announcement on GameDeveloper.com or GamesIndustry.biz or LinkedIn or whatever, and you see that a new studio has just been founded by these new, ex-Riot people, ex-Blizzard people, ex-whatever people, right? Connect with these people. Talk to them, because they will need your help. So that's just one approach when it comes to pitching for work for hire and co-dev when it comes to developers. What about own IP? How can you pitch own IP to developers? Well, one way to do it is that you can minimize your cost by teaming up with another studio that is based in a country that has very interesting grant programs. You might argue, but hang on a second, I'm the one who's been working on this. This is my thing. Well, yeah. You could either choose to go for 50% or something, or 100% of F all. Right? And so if you were to basically co-dev with a studio that's in Finland, for example, right? All of a sudden, if you need, let's say, 2 million for your game, the Finnish government will actually give you up to 1.2 million for free. This is not a loan. This is a grant. But in order for that to happen, you obviously need to have operations in Finland. So why not partner up with a studio in Finland? And then that way, you can approach a publisher and say, you know what, I don't need 2 million anymore. I need 1. Because the rest, the Finnish government's going to pay it. All of a sudden, you're giving even more value to a publisher, right, for less bucks. That's one example. Another example. You can basically expand the BD radius through co-dev and mitigate risks. So let's assume for a second that you have reached vertical slice. And you've been talking to all the publishers you have access to that you know and whatever, and it's just not sticking. But as we all know, the gaming industry is a people's industry. Why? Because with that, there's a sense of trust that's there. Right? So if you were to go and co-dev and agree to actually go for a little swap, swap card sort of kind of maneuver, where you can choose to create one company that will become an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, where you can have your IP and their IP, right? Where you can basically agree to work together and co-dev both games, depending on which one gets signed. If both get signed, congratulations. But here's where it gets really cool. By doing that, you're allowing yourself to expand your BD radius because those developers have relationships that you don't have. And you have relationships that they don't have. So why not? Again, think of it this way. 50% or something or 100% of F all. Just putting it out there. Now, you need to also consider pitching to technology providers. I work for one, and I'll tell you. Now, when it comes to live service games, you need a back-end solution and you need hosting. So if you talk to a back-end provider and a hosting provider, and you go, you know what? I would need this amount for me to finish my game, but no publisher is actually, able to do that. And if you tell technology providers, would you be willing to put in some sweat equity, aka your software, the back end, and the hosting, certain amount, obviously associated financial value needs to be established, and then you basically agree on a rev share with them. You're mitigating your risks and you're approaching publishers, telling them, I can make this awesome game, which normally would cost X, but this time it's going to cost X minus 10, for example. And this is something that technology providers every day today are considering. I should know I work for one of them. Here's another one for work for hire. Technology providers, why would they want to work with a game studio, with a developer? Well, in today's market, everybody's trying to integrate with each other. And you know what they need? Showcase titles. Talk to them. You're not going to be creating the next Baldur's Gate, but it's definitely going to help you keep the lights on. Right? So these are some of the, ways you could consider outside of the traditional methods. By no means, I'm not saying stop with the traditional methods. I'm just saying just try to think outside of the box. Publishers whose funds are running low because they've spent a lot of money but nobody's playing their games, nobody's buying their games because everybody's busy, playing a lot of older games, and everybody's got a massive backlog of games on their Steam account or whatnot. And as a result, if it's not a massive franchise or, a big hit that is somewhat unanticipated, it becomes very, very difficult. So what can publishers do? They can actually pitch to publishers as well. And by pitching to publishers, we're talking about co-publishing as opposed to canceling and shelving. Now, by co-publishing, I'm not talking about, your traditional, hey, this is my territory, or hey, this is my platform. No. I'm talking about the fact that a publisher has been working on a game that they can no longer continue supporting financially, and basically reach out to those publishers and say, listen, this is what we've spent so far. Are you able to spend the rest? And then we'll basically just share, accordingly. Why not? It's happening every day now. Another thing, a lot of games have been released, and sadly, the results have been, less than desirable. Why not consider outsourcing your player experience teams? Think community management, think live ops, right? Because live service games are the next big thing. So instead of firing people, why don't you just try to make them basically generate revenue through other channels? Now, publishers can also pitch to developers, and if a publisher is working with a developer and an agreement's been signed, and then a publisher basically is no longer able to pay for the rest of the milestones or whatever, why not renegotiate the terms of the agreement with the developers, if they can afford it? I don't know. If they have it in the vaults, why not? I'm sorry I need to speed up a bit because I've just been informed that I have only about 2 minutes left, well, even less now. But the other thing that publishers can do is, mitigate risk for live service games. And the way they can do that is really by pitching to tech providers as co-publishers this time around. So we're not talking about investors into a studio, we're talking about a co-publishing agreement. Right? Of course, the other thing is never to sign long-term commitments, when it comes to paid providers, because effectively costs vary every year, and you need to try to sort of not put all your eggs in one basket. And lastly, you have ancillary revenue generation approaches. The first one, music. If you're a publisher and you own the IP, or if you're a studio and you own the IP, that is intellectual property that can actually generate revenue for you. And this is something that the game industry really, really struggles with. A lot of studios, a lot of publishers still perceive these things as an expenditure, as opposed to something that has actual value, that can make money. And finally, that is actually also true when it comes to licensed music, because effectively there are deals that can be done with the rights owners. Now, I'm sorry I had to speed up a bit because I think I've just reached the end of my presentation, but virtually every single one of these approaches I've done. So if you have any questions, happy to have conversations. Thank you.
Hey, what's up?
Hi.
Doing well?
I'm good.
So the thing is, I have plenty of questions, but for the sake of passing the microphone to someone else, I'm gonna ask the simplest one, if you don't mind.
Please.
So, the problem with indie games, and you were talking about back there about getting 50% of something or 0 or 100% of FO, but that's not like indie games. The problem with indie games is that we have to be innovative. Like, if you have an indie game and a AAA game, and they both play exactly the same, have the exact same story, and everything is the same, 100% of the time, most of the players are going to choose the AAA.
Why?
Because they have better background, they have better history, they have better
visibility.
They have very
That's why you need to work on building a community.
Yes, that's a different topic. The main problem is that it's the tyranny of indie games. If you're not doing something that is either completely innovative or doing something that completely twists the formula, like Ultra Kill, for example. Do you know Ultra Kill?
Yeah.
Ultra Kill technically didn't do much different, but it joined the mechanics in a way that was completely fresh. That's why that's the tyranny of indie games. We have to be original. We have to have completely out their ideas, because if we don't, why would anyone buy our games?
To be honest, I don't know if I agree with you. And I'll tell you why I don't necessarily agree with you, because I think what you're describing here is not necessarily exclusive to indie games. The issue is that there is simply far too much content out there, and visibility is really, really limited. And effectively, everybody is trying to create original and innovative and outside of the box, experiences. To be honest, if this thing was a science, everyone's life in this room would be easier. It's not a science.
There are patterns you can detect.
Sorry?
There are patterns you can detect sometimes.
Of course.
It's not an exact science.
Of course.
I know,
of course.
But I think I'm talking for way too long.
No, but it's okay. I'm happy to have this conversation over a beer or a cup of coffee
if you
later.
don't mind,
That's fine.
Like, I have a lot of questions.
100%.
I need
100%.
So, anyone else with questions? Anyone? No? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because about the ancillary revenue on the side, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to music, I know that's one of the first thing I signed with my own sound designer, which I said to them, listen, we're going to make sure that when the game is done, we can also have that on the side as additional revenue, right? Even if it's a small amount, it's still worth it, right?
100%.
Like you said, it's better than zero.
Yeah.
But what else could there be, right? Like, because music is easy. There's platforms to put it out there. There's ways to distribute it that's more interesting. But when it comes to art is the other product usually that you could maybe do, but without a fan base, right? Without a big community to sell your art to. What do you have out there as channels other than that, right? Is there any that you can think of?
So, to be perfectly honest with you, art is an angle. Sorry, it was. To be perfectly honest, art is an angle that I've not necessarily considered just yet, but what I will say is that just like with music, when it comes to monetizing elements related to a game, if you have achieved a certain amount of success with that game, and there's a certain level of recognition attached to it, your initial client base, when it comes to the music and the art, starts with the players of your game, with the ex-players of your game. When it comes to art, to be honest, this is far outside of my knowledge. I would love to give you a slightly more tangible, answer. But what I will say about music is that music is not going to make you, rich in any shape or form when it comes to the likes of Spotify and Deezer and all these sorts of platforms. The real money comes from synchronizing that music to motion pictures. And that includes YouTube, that includes Twitch. Let's not even talk about television and radio. That's where proper publishing royalties come in, and those can be very handsome. Thank you very much.